People come up to me and say, this is the first time I've ever owned property. I never thought I would be able to do this, and now I've done it. We kind of like to see ourselves as the Kickstarter for real estate. REITIUM is a real estate investment platform. We are a tech company, and we created a way for anybody to invest fractionally. We use the crowdfunding model, and it's fractional ownership. So you own a portion of the property. I think it comes down to like hope and participation, and it gives people that pride of ownership.
Welcome to Season 2 of From the Blockchain, where we speak to today's most innovative entrepreneurs and thought leaders to impact the true potential of smart contract technology, Web3, and the digital frontier. I'm your host, Ashley Smith from Fame Lady Squad, and I'm thrilled to have you join today's top-tier community of forward-thinking trailblazers. We're here to foster a culture of idea sharing, creativity, and innovation that transcends industries, revolutionizes business, and drives meaningful conversation. If you're ready to forge a path to becoming a thought leader in your industry or organization, think of this podcast as your compass. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and be part of our amazing community. Oh, and please note that this podcast is for informational entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Alrighty, everybody, enjoy the show. I am so excited to be here today on From the Blockchain with my friend Laura Fortey from REITIUM. I hope I said it right. She will correct me if I'm wrong. Again, for those who are listening, I'm in studio in Vancouver, Canada. Super excited to meeting more local entrepreneurs who are blazing trails throughout the country and soon into the US, it sounds like. So today we're talking about real estate and blockchain technology and some of the possible intersections, and also just new business models and new ways for people to invest in residential real estate and other types of real estate. For those who don't know, I do have a real estate background. So I do, before I introduce Laura, I want to give a little context because we might nerd out on the real estate side, and I may need to kind of get my way back on track to make sure we're talking about the topic that our listeners today are here wanting to listen about, which is Web3 and some of the new innovation that's happening in the space. For those of you who don't know, I've been a realtor for 16 years or so in Vancouver, Canada. Not practicing so much these days, but it was actually my involvement in the profession that prompted me to want to learn about the technology. I've sat on industry boards since 2011 or 2012 or so, and soon realized that blockchain technology is one of the things that as a sector, we probably want to keep our eyes on, keep the finger on the pulse, see what's going to happen, how it may add new opportunities to the public and consumers. So anyways, for that reason, I'm super excited to speak to Laura. I'm actually speaking later today to somebody else who's also in the real estate space, totally different concepts. So people are building, everybody. It doesn't matter where crypto is. But Laura, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me in studio. It's always a nice change post-pandemic when we can hang out again and get off Zoom and be in person, IRL.
So you're a multifaceted entrepreneur. You've done a lot of things in your past. Before we dive into what you're working on today, why don't you give us a little history of what you've done prior to, say, 2023?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, post-university, lived around the world, did all that crazy stuff in my 20s and 30s. I had my own companies. Basically, when Facebook and YouTube and all of those started in around the 2006-07, I had an online company, so literally sold digital products online, learned all about the ins and outs behind the scenes, and ended up exiting that company and then created my own marketing agency from there. Then I came back to Canada, lived abroad for about 10 years, moved back to Canada, said no to Toronto. Sorry, Ontario people, but the West Coast is the best coast for me. So I moved to BC about 7 years ago, and then started the company about 5.5 years ago.
So we should speak a little bit, I think, about the birth of the company REITIUM. And partly because I think it's important for folks to recognize this is not, you guys, you and your co-founder hopping on the bandwagon with all of the excitement that's been around Web3 over the last few years. Why don't you tell us a bit about why you founded the company? What problem were you looking to solve?
Yeah, so I broke the golden rule of real estate and sold my holdings when I moved to BC. and I just couldn't ever get back in. So it's such a problem that so many people have, especially young people. They don't really have even the hope of buying anymore, so they live a different lifestyle. They spend money on lattes and avocado toast, as goes the joke, live around the world, and that's awesome. And I always say, like, keep doing that lifestyle, but also just start building as much as you can in a smaller way. And we all know that real estate is like, safe and stable for the most part, and people really want to get in. No matter where you live in the world, everybody knows that getting into real estate is something that they can actually start building their wealth. So truly, it came out of my own pain of selling my properties, now not being able to get back in living in Vancouver, and having, talking to everybody else that's out there that's going through the same thing. So really, when I met my business partner, we bonded over real estate. He's a realtor. And, his side of the story goes that he made some of his clients $1 million fixing and flipping. And, he went to family dinner and told his mom, and she was really excited. And she said, okay, son, here's $30,000. Go make me those same returns that you made for your clients. And he's like, well, I can't really do anything with $30,000. So she goes to church and she gets 6 friends together and they all come up with $30,000 each. And she says, okay, we've got 6 of us together. Now you can go buy us something. And he's like, that light bulb moment of, they're all in their 70s. Nobody's going to lend them a mortgage, but everybody has a little bit of money. So how can we pool it together so people can participate? Because that's what it's about. It's getting in, being able to participate, and then you can make your own decisions and choices with growing your wealth, keeping buying more or selling or whatever the case is. I think that's the most pain point, is that people can't even participate.
Yeah. I mean, for those listening who are not from Vancouver, the housing affordability challenges here are real, but I realize that's also something that we see all across Canada and all across the United States, especially over the last few years. Like, housing affordability crisis is everywhere, and folks who are not able to get in feel left behind. And every year that passes, it seems to be worse. And part of the problem is, like, how do you get that down payment, right? Like, even folks who earn a decent income and could probably support mortgage payments with a bit of stress, perhaps, just that down payment is usually a tough thing to do if you don't have maybe the bank mom and dad or something like that to dig into. So tell us about REITIUM and what it does.
Yeah. So, the answer to this issue is that we decided to find a way, how can we allow everybody to get in for a small number, so we brought it down to as little as $100 so you can participate. So this is investment real estate. You don't live at the property. You don't go to the property. It's strictly an investment. So it's hands off. Because that's the other piece, is like, when people get a property, then they're like, oh, now I have to be a landlord. That is a part-time or full-time job in itself. And people don't fully understand that. So having an investment property that you're completely hands off. So REITIUM is a real estate investment platform. We are a tech company, and we created a way for anybody to invest fractionally. We use the crowdfunding model. And it's fractional ownership. So you own a portion of the property, and, there may be rental dividends depending on the deal. And you can actually then also get your appreciation when you decide to sell how many ever years later. And every deal is completely different. So it's baked into the deal, like how long you need to stay in for, what returns there could be. And you can see all of that before you invest. So you, as the investor, get to pick and choose what properties you invest into.
And so I think for those who maybe are a little bit familiar with the real estate landscape, like that in and of itself is perhaps a value proposition compared to, say, buying into a REIT, right? So maybe you can, for those listening, just, is it possible to kind of give a very high level overview of just the difference of what that might look like for prospective investors?
Yeah. So we're talking about the average person here. So 95% of the population is not accredited. So they're the retail investor. And so when you're talking about a REIT, it's going to be a public REIT. There's often managers and bloated salaries. And when anything goes public, it costs a lot of money. And a lot of us know, like, if we got into Apple before it went public, we would have probably been multimillionaires or billionaires now. So in the private market, there's a potential for a lot of uptick that you don't see when it gets to the private market as high. And so when we look at private equity, which is what we're talking about, you actually have the ability to pick and choose. A lot of times REITs are a pool of properties that maybe it's something that goes against what you believe in. Maybe part of your money's invested into like oil and gas or something that goes against what you want to actually be investing in. So with us, you can pick and choose. It's like, okay, I really like this neighborhood or this hotel, or I love self-storage, or I like the idea of this thing over here. Or maybe you just look at ROI and you're like, I don't really care what it is, but I need at least 10% ROI. So you can actually decide based on your own investment thesis. And if you don't even know what these words mean, teaching financial literacy is something that we're really excited about too, because most people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and beyond don't even know what a lot of this stuff is. So it goes over our heads and we just ignore it, and we don't know where to look it up and investigate. So teaching financial literacy is a big part of what we're here to do as well.
That's awesome. And I'll remind myself later, but I'm sure we'll put some links in the show notes so you can find access to resources. And, we mentioned at the top of the show that like not financial advice, et cetera, but really what we want to do here is unpack what the opportunities look like and the types of things that are happening that are exciting. And I do think for the average person, being able to explore these opportunities is very interesting because it's very accessible. So maybe you can give us a high level overview of like what might an average investor do? What would their process be if they were thinking about participating in something on your platform?
Yeah. So we kind of like to see ourselves as the Kickstarter for real estate. If you don't know Kickstarter, GoFundMe, these are like crowdfunding platforms. So we are the tech. So when you go to Kickstarter or, GoFundMe, you see all the other deals that are listed there. Maybe you want to invest in a certain backpack or something else, a certain startup company. So we do the same thing, but for real estate. So we are a platform and we pre-vet the deals. So we have an investment committee. They look through the deals, they do some of the underwriting, and they decide, is this a viable product? Has this company been in business for X number of years? Have they done this before? So we only bring on issuers who this is what they do for a company. They've got experience. And so we do pre-vet the deals, but as an investor, it's always up to you as well what you want to be investing into. So you literally go on the platform, see the list of properties. Maybe you live in BC and you want to invest in Ontario because maybe you're from there like me and you don't want to live there. You don't want to go there, manage it, but you want to invest because you know that Hamilton, Ontario is up and coming or whatever neighborhoods are available. So you would actually go and look at whatever you would like to invest in. I mean, it's our vision that we would actually have in the future deals all over the world. So let's say you're from India in your home country and you want to invest in your home country, but you live in Canada. So the goal would be for us to have places globally where people can actually invest.
And maybe you can outline just what type of investments can retail investors make?
Yeah. So we look at anything that is investable, right? So it could be, let's say, like an Airbnb style property. So it could be a single family condo, but it's maybe a short-term rental. So it's more of a higher ROI. Could be a hotel. We love self-storage. Could be like a car wash, something that is going to generate income. And we really like recession-proof things as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic in and of itself. I'd love to dive in, but that's where I'll wait for another day. Get nerdy on that. So what type of money can retail investors put into these types of things?
So we only accept fiat, not to be confused for anything else. So right now we're regulated from BC to Ontario. And so obviously Canadian dollars, but the minimum buy-in is $100 and it depends on what province you're in, what the maximums are.
I see.
So we are regulated. We do follow the crowdfunding regulation. And so in BC, for example, per deal, you can put a maximum of $2,500 and then to a $7,500 per year maximum.
Right.
Ontario is a little bit more. They seem to allow people there to invest a little bit more, but that's the basics of it. So minimum 100, maximum 2,500 per deal.
Right. And so I guess what I wanted to get out there was just to showcase that this is not necessarily for folks who have a large savings account, although those folks might be interested as well. This is something that the everyday person can explore and see what opportunities there might be for them, and perhaps even dabble in as low as $100 to see, what that process looks like, what it feels like, and follow along. So I think that's a really neat And I think we're going to dive probably a little bit deeper into the business model, but I do want to make sure we unpack a little bit about the blockchain technology that's helping support the business. And so maybe you can speak to a little bit about why even bother? Like, why are you incorporating this technology in your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we started the company in late 2017, early 2018. So at the time when crypto was all the rage, blockchain was all the rage, and we thought, okay, like how can we use that technology, not crypto itself, but the tech of blockchain to actually support what we're trying to do here? So we are actually dealing with highly sensitive data, right? All the KYC, AML, we have a full compliance engine that we built out as well. So when you have very sensitive data, you want it secured. So we actually use the blockchain for security of the data. So it's a data layer. In the future, if there's other capabilities that are allowed by regulation in Canada and the States, we will have the ability to turn things on, but we don't allow for that at the moment. But in terms of why we use blockchain, we use it for, right now we use it for the data layer and the ease of transacting on our secondary exchange. So let's say if somebody bought into a property and then they want to sell, then we have the ease of transacting through the blockchain to the buyer.
I love the example because I think it speaks to how, I don't know if important's the right word, but how companies today can be looking at what the technology can do and also to set them up for forward-thinking ideas and things they might be able to do in the future. And especially if you're building something today from the ground up, enabling yourself to look at some of those options as they unfold. I do think it's also important maybe to speak a little bit about the process you took through examining, the regulatory environment. What does it mean? How have you ensured that, as you pave new paths for this type of model, that you're doing it in a way that's, protecting people, et cetera?
Yeah, I will say it's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
Following regulatory from day one, it was something that we knew that we wanted to do and that we had to do. Like, again, back in the 2017-18 time, a lot of people were going Wild West and doing crazy things and doing ICOs. Probably everybody here remembers that crazy Wild West time. And from the beginning, we're like, well, we're financial services, we're prop tech, we're regulated. We found out very quickly we were selling a security when a lot of people were like, you're not selling a security, use it as a utility, do this, you could do that thing. And we were like, absolutely not. We want to follow regulation. We built to build and have a company. We didn't necessarily like build to sell or build to flip. Like, we're still in 5.5 years later. So from the beginning, we knew that we wanted to follow regulatory. It took us actually 2 years to get the license, probably partly because of the pandemic was delayed everything. But we decided like, we're not going to operate under our label until we have the regulation piece. So we did some white labeling where people would use our tech. We've done actually a lot of transactions up to about 18 million through our white label customer, which helped us prove everything. It helped us work out lots of bugs. It helped us actually get that viable model for ourselves and for, to sell our technology to other white labels as well. And then so once we got our regulation go ahead, then we actually launched properties under our brand as well. So
any additional thoughts for anyone who's out there, maybe an entrepreneur thinking about, I want to explore a new space. I want to, figure out if a business that they have in mind is feasible, but the regulatory framework is confusing because maybe there's not a lot of people who have paved the way before them. Any tips or advice for folks trying to navigate those waters?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely like a can of worms.
Okay.
Would we have started the company if we knew how difficult it was with the regulation? I don't know. I don't know is the answer. It's not easy. Obviously, anytime you're dealing with healthcare, food, financial services, anything that has like highly regulation, you really have to follow it to a T, right? We're seeing lots of changes. And at any moment, the governments can change their minds about what that means to be regulated. Or, we saw it with marijuana, like then it was illegal and now it's like legal sort of, or definitely legal Canada-wide. So it's like at any moment, things can shift and change. So being able to adapt. And so that's why we actually love having the white label too, because let's say if they take away the regulation or they're not doing crowdfunding anymore for whatever reason, we're like, okay, we'll stay under that and we'll go over here and do this thing. But I would say like do your homework for sure. And I'm glad we didn't go against regulation because unfortunately some of our competitors have shut down very recently. And it's probably because they went outside of regulatory. And I guess my advice would be is try to find an industry that is not regulated or that you can do things in a way outside of regulation in that industry that's not regulated because it is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. And how do you go about finding resources or people to help you? Like that, I think is probably, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, trying to, you don't know what you don't know until it slaps you in the face.
Yeah. Well, it's expensive, right? Like legal. So, and obviously your competitors aren't going to help you. They're not going to say, okay, here's what we did. Here's how we did it. Here's the pathway, right? So, there's a couple things, right? It's like forging the path, doing the Wild West stuff and like creating something completely different or following it and waiting for them to be more open, which is kind of where we're at, right? So, it was expensive and it was a learning curve. And like, we didn't know a lot of things going into this. Following that curiosity, but also like the reason that our company's still, doing well and thriving and we're about to actually launch in the States quite soon. But it's because we have that annoying entrepreneurial staying power of like not quitting and the belief and holding that vision true to what we see as possible, to what we believe. And it's like the continuous chasing of that and then having things fall in line and knowing how to pivot really at the last second and being very flexible. Yeah. Because a lot of entrepreneurs have this one path in mind. And so when they reach that or when they don't reach that, then they sort of decide to move on to the next thing. So being adaptable for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I would recommend not getting in a regulated industry if you can. It's not easy.
No, I hear you. But it's nice to see folks like yourselves doing it, and it helps others that will come behind you, perhaps. I think the value proposition for the sort of retail consumer is very clear. Like the opportunity to explore what property investments there might be, and being able to participate from $100 to possibly $2,000-$3,000, depending where you are and what the maximums are, is very interesting. But tell me a bit more about the value proposition for the issuer and who is the issuer?
Yeah, good question. So the issuer would be a company who's looking to raise capital. So maybe it is a pre-construction development. Maybe it is somebody who has been doing this for many years. Maybe they do fix and flips. For example, there's one company that we've done a little bit of work with that does fix and flips in the States. So they buy entire apartment complexes and then they like fix and flip them. And it's like a 5-year plan. And so people know that, okay, they're in for 5 years. Here's the entire pro forma. Here's the entire plan. And that they'll get their capital when they, whatever that would be at the end.
What I'm wondering as well is you obviously vet to some extent the opportunities that come to your platform. I think it's important to clarify that you're a tech company that's facilitating these opportunities, right? Like, so you're not necessarily invested or you're not invested in these opportunities directly. Do you see a day where someone like myself could come to you and say, hey, I have a great opportunity that I want help funding with? Or is that a ways away? Because I'm not your sophisticated like developer or builder, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question because we do have a lot of people asking us that. So we are looking at doing private deal rooms. So where you could do that with, let's say, your family, or people that that know, like, and trust you. So, but when it comes to issuers, it's got to be people who have been doing this as a company. They've been doing this as a business. This is something that they've been doing for many years. They don't have to necessarily be a developer. It could be like, we know this group in Ontario and they do student housing, for example. So the housing's already built and they're just maybe fixing and flipping or buying and holding. And so really the issuers need to have that track record, that experience, because the people who actually invest in the deals, they're not just researching REITIUM because we are the platform layer, but they're actually researching the issuer. So how many years have they been in business? How many deals have they done? How many deals are under their belt? Understanding who they are, Googling them and seeing if there's any liens or anything against them. One thing I will mention, in Canada, the maximum crowdfunding deal is 1.5 million. So in the States, it's 5 million. So 1.5 million is enough for maybe like a single family condo if you own the whole thing. But a lot of times we're taking a position in certain properties. So for example, there's a hotel out in Fernie that we did a deal with. So they gave us 1.5 million of their $4 million raise. So it was just a part of what they're raising overall.
Yeah.
So it could be that we just own a position in it, or sorry, not own a position, but it could be that we offer that position to the crowd up to the 1.5 million, or it could be that it's the full entire property that's coming to raise.
I just love seeing the innovative ideas coming into play. Like, I think this type of thing, a lot of folks have probably been thinking about and hoping for opportunities, and now seeing it enabled. And obviously the other thing I'm assuming is it's a lot more cost effective now. Like, you previously, if you wanted to participate, you could never participate in something like this for $100. Like the administrative costs in and of them, like you'd have to probably put at least 10,000 minimum, maybe 15 for it to even be a valuable thing to participate in. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So for example, you're exactly right. So in the private equity space, the minimum buy-in is usually $25,000. And that is for accredited investors only, which is the top 5%, which means, you're earning over $200,000 a year, or you have 5 million in assets or $1 million in cash. That makes you an accredited investor. So usually that weeds out more than half the people in the population, right? So, and then you need to put a minimum of $25,000 in. So that buy-in alone, it's way higher than most people would have. And if the average person has 25,000, they're probably just going to go end up buying something on their own anyways. So it was reserved for higher net worth people, right? So even being able to get in was not possible. So really, the thing is that the retail crowd doesn't even know about it because it was so far out of reach. They don't even see that it was a potential until they look at the public markets like REITs or like stocks, or because they're basically like fractionalized equity, right? So
I'd love to know a little bit more about just your experience as an entrepreneur and founder, and what is your why when you're participating in something like REITIUM?
Yeah, good question. I feel like any entrepreneur, it comes from pain. Like I said, I sold my positions and I couldn't get back into the property market. But I also want to create this for everybody else. Like, why is this the way that it is? Like, why can't we have it so everybody can participate, so everybody can get in and everybody can have, I think it comes down to like hope and participation, and it gives people that pride of ownership. So we had a big party in January, and we had one of our deals launch on our platform, and we had probably 15 people come up to me and say, "This is the first time I've ever owned property." They put in $100, but it was that pride of ownership that they're like, "I never thought I would be able to do this, and now I've done it on your platform." And so it's just the start. It's just the beginning. It's people learning, and it's tasting it, right? So maybe you own $100 in 10 properties, and you learn to understand markets because now you have a vested interest, and you're understanding how things work more, and you're learning financial literacy, and you're like knowing when to look at potentially selling your position, or being locked in, and like what does that look like and feel like. So and the fun thing for us is that $100 is such a low barrier that we feel like everybody can participate. So learning, like a lot of people spend a lot of money to learn, right? So if you put $500 in across 5 properties to even just to learn, as well, those positions aren't going anywhere, right? But it's just like that piece of like being in and like having that feeling of you're growing something.
Yeah. And your attention definitely goes there. I know that over the last couple of years, I started playing around with things that were totally outside my realm, and just my attention being there. And yes, I spent some money, but I feel like I had an education.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I paid for this interesting self-exploring like education that I probably couldn't have had any other way. So I do think that's really neat. But it's great to know that you have resources. Maybe before we move on, you can speak a little bit more to that. The financial literacy piece that you were talking about. What types of resources might people find if they were, going to the links that I'm going to share with them?
Yeah, great question. At the moment, we are updating some things on our website. So we're always building out that financial literacy piece. So on some of our social media, you'll see some dripping financial literacy pieces, but we're actually building out a lot more like a blog style articles, directing people to just even understanding like what is a TFSA, what is an RRSP, like. And then when they know what these things are, then they can make an educated decision of, is it for them?
Yeah.
Is this where they want to put their money? Do they want to have it parked, or do they want to use it to invest into other things as a vehicle? So really teaching that. We've gotten a lot of really great feedback, and we also want to take it down to the younger generation as well, right? So to kids, like gamifying it, making it fun. Like this is something that none of us learned in school, right? The basics of financial literacy, emotional intelligence, all the things that school doesn't teach us. But so we want to bring it down to the level of like kids being excited and interested in like the certain things that they can actually get out of it as well.
Yeah. That's a fun thing. I mean, now I'm just speaking totally off the cuff, but like that's a fun gift. I don't know if you can technically gift it, but like if you want to buy like a little piece for your child and have them involved and have them watch and understand, that's really interesting. I will say in my world, I did not learn a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
And even language we're using today, I'm realizing like we might need to explain like KYC, know your customer. That's something I frankly did not know. And it makes sense to me once I heard it. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But it's not something, it wasn't in my language before I entered actually, frankly, learning about Web3 because the KYC is a hot topic in that space. But yeah, so I think that's really great. And I think it will help facilitate, future decision-making for people. So that's really cool. I'd love to know, well, first of all, I know you can't speak to it. There's probably things going on in the background that are maybe not like 100% yet. But it sounds like you and your business partners are planning some big things and have some big ideas. Is there anything you can share about sort of in best case scenario, like what would your dream vision look for this company in say 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, well, so you mentioned about gifting a piece to kids. So that is something that we really want to build out is the youth app, right? So that's exactly our vision is like, birthday parties, Christmas, all the holidays where kids get toys and then they just throw them in the closet a couple months later. So we visualize that, aunts and uncles and grandparents, whoever it is, can gift money to the kid. And then once that reaches $100 or more, then the kid can invest in something. So the parents obviously facilitate the trade to keep it above board, but teaching the kids how to do that. Like, oh, do I want to look at this place or that place and gamifying it and giving it like different badges and keeping people interested and excited and like making it fun. So we spent the better half of last year in the States. So looking at launching in the States within the next 6 months or so, 6 months to a year, I would say by next year. Really, we started in Canada because it's our backyard.
Yeah.
And what we learned is that it's some of the strictest regulation in the world, which it's funny as Canadians, we think America's regulation would probably be stricter, but it's a little bit more relaxed than Canada. So for us going to the States, it's easier on that front. And so we see it as like the next place that we would go into. So really stepping into the States, it's the biggest player in the world, in the Western world anyway. And the people that you meet in the States, like a few weeks ago, Thomas was in New York, my business partner, and he met Gary Vee and certain people that you just don't have exposure to sitting in an office in Canada. So we're really excited about the networks and the co-creation with people into the US market. And what we would love to see is for Canadians to be able to invest into the US market as well, or globally for that matter, right? So really in the next 5 to 10 years, that's a great question. I feel like things change so much in the entrepreneurial world that 10 years is just like a whole lifetime away.
Yeah, especially when tech is involved too.
Totally. Tech changes so quickly, so much happens. I mean, the crowdfunding regulation in Canada only happened 8 years ago,
right?
In 2015, right? It was like on the back end of the 2012 Obama administration. They brought in the Jobs Act, which brought in crowdfunding to the States, and then a couple years later, it came to Canada.
Yeah,
and actually, like 2 years ago, it went from $250,000 per deal to $1.5 million.
Yeah.
So what can you get for $250K?
Yeah, nothing here.
Exactly. That's it. So how will it change? Like, and they're talking about it even going higher here. Like it's 5 million in the US. And that would be awesome if it went to 5 million in Canada, for example, because then we could actually have bigger positions in certain things and then have the crowd get involved. So long story short, the 5-year vision, it would be like launching in multiple different countries, helping potentially even like helping create regulations. So in the third world countries, a lot of them don't have regulation. So theoretically, we could go and create something there.
Yeah.
But what we would probably do is bring what we already know with our regulatory mind frame and create that standard of here's what you need to do to get into a position, and potentially even without even necessarily making it our MO, but having regulation.
Yeah. Introducing best practices.
Totally.
And like things that will be guide rails and protecting the consumer, et cetera. Right. Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, I think it's becoming tougher and tougher to speak to where the future is going to be. I was asked at an interview the other day about like my 5-year, what I see myself doing in 5 years related to something. I'm like, that is an impossible question right now. It's so tough because things change so fast. I would love to know, since we're on a podcast called From the Blockchain, we're talking about innovation and technology. Are there other things in the tech realm that you're excited about that may serve your business model in the future?
Well, probably this is the trend everybody's talking about is AI, right? I actually love AI. I see out of the big trends, the blockchain trends that we've seen, to me, AI has a lot of legs. Like I feel like everybody's going to be using AI. I do actually love the blockchain too. I'm really glad that we are using it. I think that what happened was crypto took over and NFTs took over. So the blockchain kind of got like a confused, muddled wrap around the technology. People are like, oh, you're blockchain, you're doing crypto. Oh, you're blockchain, you're doing NFT. Even our bank 5 years ago actually closed our account and told us we couldn't transact because we had blockchain in our company name. And they're like, you're doing crypto stuff. I'm like, this has nothing to do with crypto.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand what that even meant.
Right.
And that's the bank. So, So I think that the technology of blockchain has not seen its day yet.
Yeah.
I feel like people confused it for so many other things.
Yeah.
Maybe AI will be using blockchain in some fashion. Probably it already is in a lot of ways. But I think definitely I want to see how the blockchain is going to make a name for itself without being attached to crypto and NFTs.
Oh, 100%. And I think there's a lot of things, over the last 6 months, I've been paying attention to different companies and things that are happening that just right now seems so quiet. No one cares. And it has nothing to do with market speculation at all. It just has to do with the tech and how it might enable more streamlining, better use of data, as you mentioned, easier transactions, but not transactions related to like monetary gain, just facilitating things, allowing them to happen more frictionlessly. But AI is interesting. I realize now we're kind of talking like, a little bit airy-fairy, like we don't know how it's going to work. But I do think that AI, when it comes to real estate, is going to be really interesting, related to how do you analyze, say, a property for as an investment. Like, and there probably will be certain protocols or things that AI can quote unquote look at to determine, is this going to be good? Is it going to predict, like it might have a good future gain and just capital value, or will this be something that might draw an income based on certain factors? Anyways, again, I'm speaking a little bit listeners, but these things will happen, I believe. Yeah.
So let's say in theory, if we had like 100 deals on our platform and you're like, I don't really want to look through all the deals and research every single thing and read all the documentation. So in theory, you could maybe say to AI, okay, analyze these 100 deals that REITIUM has on their platform.
Yeah.
And here's my criteria of what I'm looking for. Tell me which deal, the top 5 deals, which would be the best for me based on what I'm looking for, how much I want to put in. Obviously, still do your own diligence from there. But I feel like we can get AI to help us with those kind of things. And like they can read through 30-page documents like instantaneously. So instead of us reading through the entire thing, it could be something that helps us to say, okay, here's the top 5 deals based on the criteria that you put in and you told AI to look at. Here's the top 5 deals that are for you on REITIUM. And then you go, oh, okay, great. That just saved you hours and hours of like analyzing against each other. Obviously, they can never predict the future, but it's like it gives you that basics of like, okay, here's the 5 ones. Well, I wanted to do this kind of thing in this province, so I'm going to go for these 1 or 2 over here.
Yeah. Really neat. I think it's going to be interesting to see where the world is in a few years and the tools in all of our hands and how they might help us make better decisions. So that's exciting. And I think especially adjacent to other technologies like what you're working on here, which is really neat. So I do hope people check out REITIUM and better understand what you're offering. I wonder, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you feel is important for our listeners to know?
I mean, there's probably so many things. I feel like, like post-pandemic, a lot of things have changed, right? And I'm actually really excited for AI. I feel like, and blockchain and all these technologies, like, I feel like we don't even know where things are going to go yet, right? We were sort of talking before we started the show about like banking-like products and how things are shifting and how things are morphing as they can and need to, right? So I actually love what the younger generation is pushing for because they're the ones that are pushing a lot of this change.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, there's so many different things in the working world, like even the working from home. Like I love the fact that the pandemic and the Gen Zers are pushing for that, for example. That's just like super basic, but also like working from abroad, like go somewhere for a month and work at a job and work on your laptop at the same time. Like we are now noticing that people can be more effective working from home and not being distracted in the office. So I don't know. I really think, especially when it comes to tech, like you can't have all your devs sitting in a room anymore. There's so much distraction going on, right?
Yeah. I think the theme is really that it's time for many of us to break down our assumptions about the way things ought to be and the way things are going to be, right? And real estate in particular is a space generally that it's still in many ways functioning as such a traditional sector, and it blows me away, frankly, how little disruption the real estate sector has seen over the last 15 years, considering how much the advancements of technology, the advancements of consumer wants and, consumer behavior, for example, and how sophisticated the everyday consumer is becoming. So I think it's really neat to start breaking down some of those assumptions of how things need to be, how they ought to be, how we participate and learn about, the opportunities we might have. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch you and your journey, and you as a founder. I think you're phenomenal. I'm a big supporter of female founders, and I just love seeing women who are like really at the forefront, especially of innovation. So very, very cool. Where can our audience find you, and where can they find REITIUM? And don't worry, I will put them in the show notes so you don't have to like spell it all out. But where's the best place to find you and the company?
Yeah. So the company, it's very simple, at REITIUM everywhere, REITIUM.com. For the Canadian listeners, there are deals live on the platform now, which is at REITIUM.fund. So that's where the crowdfunding takes place. Personally, you can find me on LinkedIn, Laura Fortey. That's probably the best place.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, especially in person. For those who are listening on our podcast streaming platforms, please do come find us on YouTube and subscribe because I'm excited that we're spending more time on YouTube. And thank you so much for joining us today, Laura. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait. And maybe we'll have to have you back in a couple years and see the evolution.
That would be great.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ashley.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of From the Blockchain. I really hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any ideas about future episodes, including themes or potential guests, please check for a link in the show notes. Happy to hear from you. Also, if you're interested in being a potential sponsor for From the Blockchain, I'd love to hear from you as well. Check for a special link just for you in the show notes. All right, everybody. Again, thanks for being here. Love the show. Love being with you. Please remember to subscribe, review, and share with your friends. Until next week, have a great one.